All right, Shalom Israel, giving all praises to Yahweh, by Hashem Yahweh Shai, by Hashem Rakah Kadash, Rakatah Yahweh, Rakatah Yahweh Shai, double honors to the apostles, elders, bishops, great millstone. Salutations to the brothers, teaching word for the hopeful elect, soon to be elect, most high will, hopeful extended elect, Shalom. Getting right into it, man. I'm going to just put definition of a coon, and I don't want to read all this, but I'll start with it. The Coon caricature is one of the most insulting of all anti-black caricatures. The name itself, an abbreviation of raccoon, is dehumanizing. As with Sambo, the coon was portrayed as a lazy, easily frightened, chronically idle, inarticulate buffoon. The coon differed from Sambo in subtle but important ways. Sambo was depicted as a perpetual child, not capable of living as an independent adult. The coon acted childish but was an adult, albeit a good for little adult. You got coons, coming against the truth. Niggards coming against the truth. I'll get that definition of Niggard. Sambo was portrayed as a loyal and contented servant. Indeed, Sambo was offered as a defense for slavery and segregation. How bad could these institutions have been, as the racialists, if black people were contented, even happy being servants? The coon, although he often worked as a servant, was not happy with his status. He was simply too lazy. That's these men that won't get out and teach, or too lazy to look up words and go into history, too lazy to do the work of the Most High, or too cynical, to attempt to change his lowly position. Yeah, you'll have a coon ass just be like, I refuse to work because they ain't pay me enough, or they this and that, and live with different people, live off of different people, leeching and all that. Coon ass niggas, man. Ninjas, call them too. Also, by the 1900s, Sambo was identified with older, docile black people who accepted Jim Crow laws and etiquette, whereas coons were increasingly identified with young, urban black people. So there's a lot of young-ass YN coons, as well as old coons, too, who disrespected white people. Stated differently, the coon was a symbol gone bad. So, now, they would, that's why they say, like, when you work and stuff, they call you a coon because you working and all that. And, I ain't working for nobody. But this dude allowed himself to get caught up in predicaments where he can't get out of, at the so-called white man's hand, of power. So that ninja doesn't make any sense. I'd rather work and have my own money, even if you got to clock in with these devils and make your own money. You still, everybody got to work somehow, some way. It's, that term, you don't work, you don't eat. Even going back to Adam working from the sweat of his brow. It says the prototypical movie coon was Steppin' Fetchit, the slow-talking, slow-walking, self-demeaning nitwit. It took his character almost a minute to say, "Eyes be catching my feet, is not boss." So often depicted as uneducated, because, hey, it don't have nothing to do with your accent, man. But if you could talk country, you could talk like you from the Midwest, East Coast, whatever. But if you, talk slow, or, not being able to put your words together, whatever, or not being able to express yourself in a way to communicate, to be able to come across effectively, where it's edifying and all that, then they're going to call you, this dude's slow, or this dude's, So we're not talking about accent of what state you were born in. That has nothing to do, even though, a lot of our people are deprived a lot of times, you know, in certain states, you know, that doesn't mean that they're not intelligent or have some sense of character with thought, you know. It says, before his death. Okay, cinema historian Lambassador Coon, as played by Stephen Fetchit and others. Before his death, the Coon developed into the most blatantly degrading of all black stereotypes. The pure Coons emerged as no account niggas with the ER word. You read it for yourself. This is from Jim Crow Museum. I didn't write this. Those unreliable. That's what niggas are. They unreliable. They have no respect for, concerning liability when it comes to dealing with their neighbors, their own people. You know? You ask somebody to be somewhere on time and the nigga's always late. Now, even if he's late and he's still effective and doing effective work and he's still serious about his business, just like at any job, you the hardest worker there, and you there most of the time, and you late every now and then, they'll still keep you. But a unreliable nigga, like he tells you he gonna be there, he tells you that he's able to do this and he doesn't. That's what that's talking about. Crazy. And these are a lot of these YNs, man. But you could grow up to be a crazy fool too, a crazy Niggard too. Lazy. Oh, that's a big one. And we're known, that's a proverb to us, stereotype, lazy. Even a lot of women play on these stereotypes, That's why I can't stand niggas. Y'all lazy, y'all never, and a lot of times that's the case, especially, when you're young growing up. You fall into those things because you never got taught that. I understand that. You never got taught. It's like you could be 20 years old and never got taught to, how to conduct yourself, how to, So, but, that's another thing. That's more of a psychological thing. But it affected a lot of our people. But you still got to break out of it and be like, nah, man, I can't do it. I gotta work. No matter who you working for, I gotta work. I can't be, depending on another man and, leeching off another man and leeching off of a woman or whatever. I gotta make my own money, even if it's not the money I want to make. But a nigga won't regard that. It says subhuman creatures. Good for nothing. And that's what a lot of these niggards are. Because you'd be like, well, what's the point? Because they just sit around and do nothing and shit. What's the point? And he's like, oh, you a sellout. You work for the white man. Nah, we got to. It says in the scriptures, he shall be the head and we shall be the tail. It said a man shall work by the sweat of his brow. He said, Most High said he's going to send our enemies against us. But bond men, bond women, no man can buy us. There ain't nothing we could do right now as a whole to give out our situation. So you got to work. Creature for nothing more than eating watermelons, stealing chickens. Good for nothing more than eating watermelons, stealing chickens, shooting crap. That's what Negroes do. Or butchering the English language. And that's comes a little pride with that with America because, they're not the real English. We are. Land of angels, that's what England means. But, if you want a job or something, you would want to, like I said, you want to pronounce your words more clearly So you could just be. It just has nothing to do with accent and where you grew up. It's just can somebody understand you, the words you putting together, the sentences you putting together. Even with doing these lessons, I'm talking with me too. We talking to ourselves too. Um, some words are slurred. Sometimes we talk little slow, and people want you to talk fast and get to the point and all that. The Coon caricature was born during American slavery. Slave masters and overseers often described the enslaved as slow, lazy, once pushing, and eye-servant and trifling. Now, a lot of these stereotypes, if they were untrue, have a lot of times become true. Now, I looked up. Now, it says the word Niggard or niggardly itself does not appear in the Apocrypha, and it does. I got it right here. So we don't listen to AI all the damn time. We don't listen to Blue Letter all the time. We spit out the bones. So we're not being guided by a so-called white man's field of education, whatever you call it. And here it is in the Apocrypha, Niggard. Riches are not comely for a niggard, and what should an envious man do with money? A wicked eye envieth his bread, and he is a niggard at his table. Sirach 14:10. So, and I wanted to get actually the definition and but I did. I was hoping I could look through it to the through the Blue Letter, but it says right here, however, the concept of miserliness, what is it, miserliness. He's a miser or stinginess. That's what a nigga, he don't share. So these factors are true when it comes to most of these so-called black young men, and we talk about men because we're supposed to be the head of our houses, head of the ministry, and so forth. So if you have, so you go back to Coon, when you go back to the controversy during the time of the civil rights movement and all that, 1960, when Jake was fighting for his rights, a Niggard or a Coon would be somebody that's not fighting, somebody's not on the front line, or somebody's just staying quiet and all that. But that relates to the truth too. And now the truth is becoming the voice of the earth, so to speak, in righteousness to fight for what is right and to address what is wrong, or to address overall wrong and right, what is wrong and what is right. And the Coons and Niggard, they stand by and do nothing. So for a lot of people, of our people, regarding man first, and say that they love the so-called white man, or they don't see nothing wrong with America, we're a hate group and all that, they wouldn't have been saying that so much in the 60s because they felt the oppression. See, these niggas today that grow up, they grow up, they grow up differently. They're not so supervised. They're not so criminalized in that kind of way where justice is not there. Because back then, justice wasn't there. No matter how much you fought for it. So you felt the oppression. And it says oppression maketh the wise man mad. So these niggards are not wise. So a lot of times, that's why people love this country, trying to save the so-called white man, and they call it we call it homestuck syndrome sometimes. And it tells you that in the scriptures, it says, is Israel a slave? Is Israel a slave? King James Version. Slave born, homeborn slave. Jeremiah 2 and 14. Is Israel a servant? Is he a homeborn slave? Why is he spoiled? Why are you robbed? Like always complaining, always talking about, and it's never, because if Israel is not complaining, he's fed up, and he's talking about, well, the hell with America, he does nothing about it, and he'll probably stay in the shadows or whatever. Or if he wants to protect America or for America and don't see nothing wrong with it, and even overall, what I'm talking about, the Edomites, so-called white people. And then he talks against us, and that's all it is, and he's not addressing anything of any kind of other nature that is wrong on the earth, even dealing with our people. Something's wrong with that Niggard. He's a damn demon, because you got all this debauchery, all this other stuff happening, and he's not talking about that also. Yahweh Shai, it did say of him that he came in the volume of the book. He addressed everything. So you got half-sighted brain working Niggards, Coons, that say they love the government, or they say they, what's wrong with us? Why we hate the so-called white man? What are the Edomites? And we plenty times explained to them that all these so-called white people that may look like so-called white people, because they're so-called for a reason, might go back to Jacob, and they don't address that. So we're dealing with somebody that thinks on a low base level. Even with vocab, he thinks on a low base level. And maybe they're not so stupid, but they do have they do themselves, like to themselves, know how to keep these subject matters, off the table that concerns the whole world. That's, those places or those people of those places, people of those places are not doing right, that are doing every, they won't address the child trafficking, organ harvesting. They won't address sodomy. They won't address adultery going high in America. They won't address none of that. So, they're coons, man. Lazy. What did it say? Cool. Well, let me see what this meaning says. It says, a niggard is a person who is miserly. I said miser. I don't think a miser is a good word. I think it comes from that word misery. Miserly, stingy, or ingenuous, ungenerous. It's like the quality of being miserly or stingy. And that's what most Americans are. Most of our people are. And the people that come against this word, come against the prophets, that's what they are. It is crucial to understand that Niggard and niggardly are etymologically unrelated to a racial slur. Well, not so much. They similar. It's just that they capitalize on the proverb and byword, when it comes to black people, so-called black people. They put emphasis on it, and then they intertwine it with the character and conduct, or misbehaved character conduct of black people, like they see on the news or they see on these cop shows. So when they say, well, a Niggard is different, well, nah, you can attach that to the same kind of meaning. It's just more emphasis on us as a people. And that's what it said in the scripture. We're going to become bywords and a proverb to people. So if you say, well, they show a definition of a thief, and they always putting the so-called black man in the camera and on the news and all that, you're gonna eventually think that's what a thief is. But everybody steals. Just like Tupac with the thug life thing, that came from the East Indians when they were robbing trains and all that, thugging. But let Tupac do it, and that's what a thug is. Let Bone Thugs, that's what a thug is. Who was that other one? Trick Daddy, that's what a thug is, because they use it as a marketing strategy to key in on us as a people for the sake of claiming us to be negative. And the top, this is what negativity is. This is where crime is. But we know it's criminals behind closed doors that are controlling this country. There are thieves behind closed doors. It says in John 10:10, the thief come not but to steal, kill, and destroy. We know it's a whole mega elite family, elite men, elite people, political figures in high places, higher than even Trump, that are that key in on our low state. But just because you're in a low state, that doesn't mean you have to act like a Niggard or a nigga or a coon. Now Coon's, when I just read that, Coon was somebody that was kind of rebelling against the so-called white man. Like, okay, you go out in the cotton field. I don't want to work in the cotton field. Oh, you Coon. Or I don't want to do your dirty laundry. You Coon. But now that we have knowledge, wisdom, understanding to know how to act in even in our low state, and what have Jake have done, he a lot of hate is within the black communities, even Latino communities. So they put it on themselves. So, so-called white men don't really have to do it. Jake does it himself. Fuck you, nigga. Coon ass nigga. And when we say coon, we're coming from perspective of you not, you selling out to the Lord. You selling out to the system. Now, I didn't mean selling out to the Lord, but you don't you don't believe in the Lord. You don't do His work. You don't believe in His men, and you coons for the so-called white man. So you're rebelling against your power and your true master, which is Yahweh Yahushai. Now, if you don't want to believe that, and you say we're a hate group, we understand that, because it said we're gonna be hated among all men. But you can't say that hate is not justifiable, especially when you're in the face of adversity. Just like the slaves back then that were killing the slave masters and trying to escape because of ill treatment, because of murder upon their children, their families, and so they rebelled, or took a law up in their own hands, so to speak. Not even really a law in their own hands. They just reacted in rebellion because that's what they felt they can. That's the only thing they could do to protect their families. So escape was considered a crime back then. So you got coon ass niggas, niggards, ninjas, got no good even in their adult state, like it said, but still acting childish. They know, they intelligent, they go to school. Some of them, a lot of them know the Bible, and they still be like, well, this is not so bad of a place to be here under our oppressor. This is not so bad to learn from our oppressor. This is not so bad to make friends with our oppressor. And it says clearly in the scriptures, never trust thine enemy. It says, envy not the oppressor. So, and it says in the scriptures, what it says, in prosperity is forgetfulness of affliction. So if these Negroes, these coon ass ninjas that come against the truth and men of the Lord and prophets, if they were back then getting their back whips every day from the so-called slave master, they would be like, oh, y'all got a plan? We'll go with y'all, if they're those kind of coons. But remember, the way that so-called white man looked at it back then, that they lazy and they no good but eating watermelon and all that, which was derogatory, which was ill proverb, whatever. But you know what? The thing about it is these Negroes, a lot of these ninjas and even the young ones have become just what the so-called white men falsely accused them to be. Lazy, no good, no accountable, none but good for eating watermelon and chicken, hanging out smoking porch monkeys and all that. So don't blame us for pointing out the real and the obvious. And I'm pretty sure that a real woman of our nation, of course, and any woman, I believe, they don't like Niggards. And anybody that does, any woman that does, they're Niggard themselves. So, I think that's it. Hope that was edifying. To the next video. Shalom.